Hello everyone, and welcome to Tykus Teaches You Stuff. As you may have imagined, this is Tykus, and today we're going to talk a little bit about item descriptions, in particular getting them altered and the rules that apply with the upcoming event. I just wanted to touch on this because it can be a bit confusing. The game has an excellent reference under the alter verb, A-L-T-E-R, though it is a bit overwhelming if you're not used to the setup of it. I think there are 34 parts to the alter verb, and it gets a little in depth. So I just wanted to touch base on some of just the surface items and maybe clarify some of the references there. Any item you have is going to have the possibility of 3 sets of descriptions. Every item has a base description, and then if you have the opportunity to get an alteration done, you can add a long description or a show description, and let's get into explaining exactly what that stuff is. The base description is what you see in normal gameplay. In the example I have here, we're going to use a serrated voltite falchion. The base description is often referenced as the 15-15-15 rule, and that confuses people. So our item here, a serrated voltite falchion, we're going to use the slash method here. I think that is the simplest way so you can see where the numbers come in. This currently breaks down into a 10, 7, 8. If we look, a serrated has 10 characters. That's 9 letters and 1 space. The word voltite is 7 letters, and the word falchion is 8 letters. This is a legal description because it is under the 15-15-15 rule. It makes sense, and it doesn't break any material rules or some other things that we'll get into here. The base description has 3 segments. They're broken into the article, the adjective, and the noun. The first section is called the article, and it must begin with a, an, or some, though I believe a set of is also allowed, so you can have a set of Crotterine plate mail, but it's got to begin with one of these articles. The second section is called the adjective section, and it cannot begin with the words and or of. You can get pretty creative and fit things into 15-15-15, but you can't start the second section with the word and. This is the adjective section, and you will reference that when getting your items. Like I would type get my voltite falchion, and if you somehow manage to have the words and or of, you would have to type get my and falchion or get my of falchion, and that's just not right. And the last section is reserved for the noun only. This is a single word, a single noun only. You do not want a battle sword or a traveler's cloak, because then you have to reference it by the first word. You would reference it by the word battle or the word travelers and not the word sword or cloak, and that really just doesn't work out in the way gameplay is. So the first section is an article. It's got to start with a, an, some, or a set of. The middle section cannot start with the words and or of. They can be contained within, they cannot start with that. And the last section has to be just a noun. Next, we're going to move on to a long description. This is just takes the base description and adds some things to it. Typically, you will see just a phrase added to the end. It would be a serrated voltite falchion with a drake-shaped basket hilt. But I wanted to emphasize here that you're not limited to that. You can actually add words into the description as long as the item has a valid base description in there. So we added the word wickedly, and we added the phrase with a drake-shaped basket hilt. Just some rules. Try to keep the phrase to fewer than 12 words. Once you get past 12 words, it becomes extremely wordy, and it's actually irritating to watch people interact with the item because your screen scrolls even worse than it already does. There's a rule that there are no commas allowed anywhere within a long description or a base description. You cannot have a name or a phrase that you would not be able to see from a distance. So we could not have a wickedly serrated Voltite falchion painted with Tykus's name. You wouldn't be able to see that at a distance. I think the only things that do allow names or phrases are large items like maybe a great shield or a great cloak. I suppose you could have a great cloak embroidered with Ice Mule for life or something on it, something that you could see from a distance. And just to make things sound well, you probably want to end with a noun in your phrase there. I've seen some ones that end with things other than nouns, and they just don't sound quite right. It makes you feel like there should be more words past that. Next, we're going to move on to the show. This is what you're going to see when you look at your item or you show your item to another player. You would type show my falchion to Tykus, and then in return I would see that. This is the description that was just on an item that I had. So this the blade of this Voltite falchion has been kept in immaculate condition, and it shines brightly in the light. The cutting edge of this blade has been honed to a razor's edge. Blah, 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 blah. You see it. You can have a variety of things on here. And like I said, it's the point of it is so you can show your cool item to somebody else and they get a much better idea of what it is supposed to be. This usually falls into a paragraph. It doesn't have to be very long, but the game will allow 500 characters, though you are not supposed to put force any sort of emotions or imagination into it. It's supposed to essentially be a bland, cut and dry description. Nothing's supposed to be scintillating or glowing or makes you feel nauseous or anything like that. You can't force an emotion. And lastly, you want to avoid providing information that the viewer could not possibly know. You cannot have a sword that once belonged to Ulrich von Liechtenstein of Gelderland. No one would ever possibly know that. So it has to be just what you would know from looking at the item, and it can't force you to have some sort of a reaction or an emotion. When you look at your items or you show your items to other people, it may have additional things tacked on to the end of your description. There's a variety of ways to get those. Here's a short list of what you might see. You also notice a small enchanter's glyph. That's from a wizard enchantment. There appears to be something written on it. Is a label from Four Winds Island. A blessed item has a holy light that radiates. Player-made items will have a crafting mark. Surrounded by a scintillating colored light is going to be E-blade. Gleams faintly with an inner light, I believe, is minor elemental edge. And then the strange necrotic haze is an ensorcelment. There's a whole variety of other ones you see. These ones are very common. Special items have special things. Some containers you can see the contents of. But this is just a fairly common list of other things that might tack on to the end of a show description. Or if there's not a show description, these will show anyway. So if I have something with a long description and you show it to someone, some of these can be seen. Recently, they've changed the rules so it's possible to get both a long and a show. Up to this point, you could only have one or the other. As of recently, I guess they changed the way longs and shows work within the game, and it's possible to have them both. But this is not something that is normal. Don't have an item with a long and ask for it to get a show. This is a specific special merchant service, and it should not be expected to be done on a regular basis. Don't ask for it unless they're specifically offering it. It came up recently, and I just wanted to touch on that. Here's some no-nos to ask for. You should never tell the viewer how to feel, think, or what to imagine. Like I said, never force an emotion or a feeling just by looking at the item. There's not allowed to have anything that's overly risque. That doesn't mean you have to avoid sexy clothing, but you should stay away from undergarments or adult toys or those sorts of things. They will get you in trouble. There's a few things that they straight up say no. There's no demon parts and no pieces of playable races. Also, items are not to be made to glow, pulsate, vibrate, shake, rattle, squirm, giggle, shimmer, or emanate. Though I believe recently with the alchemy dyes, they do have some glowing or scintillating dyes, but I think that is a separate system from this. And you need to avoid the words that seems to or appears to. So you do not want a sword that appears to move on its own, or it seems to ripple in the wind. Those are just two things to avoid. And this is just with the upcoming event. I wanted to touch on some general merchant etiquette. Before you get in there, get familiar with the ATLER verb. Become aware of what is usually allowed and what is specifically not allowed. There's a lot of leeway, but having a good grasp on what is just straight up not allowed is a good idea. Once you get in there, if you ask for something and they say no, no means no. Don't plead with the merchant. Don't say, my friend got it done. One merchant will do something and the next will say no. So just be courteous and take no as no. And lastly, be ready when it's your turn. Have a good idea. It takes forever when somebody gets picked by the spinner and they're not ready, and it's 20 minutes and all they did was turn their sword blue. It's frustrating. Just spend a few minutes and get your ideas under control before you go in. It just makes for a better play all around. Lastly, please like, subscribe, comment. If you have enjoyed this or found this interesting, just take a second, throw some comments down below. Tell me what you like or dislike or some other topics you'd like to see. This has been Tykus Teaches You Stuff. I hope you have a great day.